everybody, thank you for joining us at Killer Bites, a show where we talk about crazy crimes while staying completely sane. Well, trying. Today I'm going to tell you all about the Ken and Barbie killers. The name might sound super sweet, but do not be fooled. We might have an idea of what a stereotypical bad guy looks like, but in reality, they can look like anybody. For Karla Homolka and Paul Bernardo, the cover for their gruesome crimes was their good looks and wealthy background, which is why they were fittingly nicknamed Ken and Barbie. Before we get to the story, I just want to give you a trigger warning that we will be discussing sexual assault and substance abuse in this episode. Paul Bernardo was born on August 25th, 1964 in Scarborough, Canada. Paul was often described as an adorable, polite, and happy kid. He came from a very well-off family, was a good student, a Boy Scout, and was liked by his peers. And as Paul got older, he grew into his good looks, which gave him yet another advantage in life. Paul also had a dark side to him though. He was an arrogant brat, but to be fair, it's not like his home life was some walk in the park, you know? His dad, Kenneth Bernardo, was a rage-filled man who put his family through some dense emotional trauma. He was verbally abusive and later would be charged with sexually assaulting 2 minors, one of which was his own daughter. This was really hard on their family, as I'm sure you can imagine, always hearing your parents fighting, getting screamed at constantly, and on top of everything, your dad turns out to be this vile human. Oh, gross. It's stressing me out just thinking about it. But at one point, Paul's mom straight up just started living in the basement. She couldn't handle the stresses of home life or the abuse anymore and disconnected herself from the rest of the family. Paul just kind of rolled with the punches. Even though his home life was really hectic, he didn't let that show on the outside. But this would all change during an argument between Paul and his mom where she admitted that he was conceived out of wedlock, and the man he knew to be his dad for the past 16 years of his life wasn't actually his dad. Kind of a huge bomb to drop, don't you think? After this, Paul wasn't the same. He would call his mother terrible names and she would retaliate and call him the bastard child from hell. Paul got older and ended up joining a multi-level marketing scheme called Amway. I was asked about it and I did not join. Well, Paul got heavily invested into the culture of Amway because they are a motivational speaker type company. He would buy tapes of these speakers, reading books that would make him more successful. He read American Psycho like it was the Bible and idolized Patrick Bateman. To make things even worse, he used pickup techniques he learned from pickup artists at bars to hit on women. Horrifyingly enough, this would work on some women, but once he had them, he would treat them like absolute garbage. Around this same time, Paul started telling his friends about his dark sexual fantasies, one of which he called his virgin farm, a dream that involved capturing a bunch of women, forcing them to breed virgins for him to use as his slaves. This dude is generally so cringy and disgusting. In Paul's dating life, all his girlfriends said that the relationship would start off great, but things would go downhill pretty fast. Within a month or even sooner, Paul became incredibly forceful and demanding of what he expected in the bedroom. And this consisted of hurting or embarrassing the women in some way. He got a kick out of when they were scared of him and overall had terrifying, demeaning energy. This guy was an abusive, manipulative asshole who verbally, physically, and emotionally harmed his girlfriends. He would hit them, call them horrible names, and embarrass them in front of other people. At the very worst, he would do vile things to them without their consent and then threaten their lives if they even thought about telling someone. And around this time, there was a significant influx of assault cases around the Scarborough area where women and girls were being followed, attacked, and violated. The usual victim was a female aged between 15 and 21, and all the attacks had major similarities. They would be beaten, yelled at, and commanded not to go to the police. In May of 1987, 2 women were harmed in this way. One attempted assault led investigators to believe that the same man was responsible for all 3. Paul had DNA samples taken from him, but they wouldn't be tested until 2 years later. And in October of 1987, Paul and Carla finally met. Carla Leanne Homolka was the oldest of 3 daughters, born in Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. On May 4th, 1970, teachers liked Carla because she was a bright, diligent student. But because of all this, she also set incredibly high standards for herself, making her a stubborn perfectionist. On top of all of that, she was known to be outspoken and vindictive. She was one of the prettiest and most popular girls in her school and formed her own little clique of mean girls, where she was essentially the Regina George of the group. Despite her terrible attitude and overall vibe, she was a huge animal lover. She worked at a pet store in high school, and once she graduated, she was hired at a vet clinic and eventually would become a vet tech. In the middle of summer, Carla was invited to attend a vet convention where she met Paul Bernardo in a hotel restaurant. From the jump, these two were attracted to each other, and Carla, unlike the other women Paul dated, really liked his sick, sadistic, sexual side. By the way, she was 17 and he was 23. Paul discovered that Carla had the same dark fantasies that he did. The two started dating almost immediately, and Paul made long drives a couple of times a week to see Carla. But like Paul's previous girlfriends, he asserted his dominance over Carla and became incredibly abusive pretty soon after. He would insult her and demand that she look a certain way. He controlled what she ate, what she wore, and especially what they did in the bedroom. Carla ended up creating a self-improvement list where she wrote down things that Paul told her, such as be a perfect girlfriend for Paul, remember you're stupid, remember you're ugly, remember you're fat. I don't know why I tell you these things because you never change. And when the two met, Paul wasn't the first person she had been intimate with, and this really upset Paul. I assume it's because he's really insecure and can't stand the fact that she had a life before him. But in reality, it's because he hated that he couldn't take this one thing from her. He's so disgusting, he just makes my skin crawl. Even though this sounds like quite literally the worst relationship ever to me, Paul proposed to Carla and she said yes. However, around the same time, the sexual assaults around the area started up again. One of those included a teenage girl that Carla worked with. She was drugged, taken advantage of by the couple, and when the girl woke up, she couldn't remember what had happened or that she had been violated. The Homolka family really liked Paul and didn't care that the two had an age difference. They liked having him over to their place and getting to know him. He was friendly with everyone, particularly Carla's 15-year-old sister, Tammy. Paul hatched up a plan to slip something strong to Tammy and take advantage of her because she was a virgin, and Carla couldn't satisfy those particular needs. Instead of being absolutely disgusted when approached with this idea, Carla thought that this was a great plan and wanted to help her own sister. Their first attempt at doing this was during a summer trip in July. Carla stole some animal anesthetics from her workplace and laced her sister's food with it. This was unsuccessful, however, because Tammy woke up before Paul could start taking advantage of her. The second time these people really tried it again was in December of 1990 after a Christmas dinner in the Homolka's house. Carla told Paul that she was gifting her sister's virginity to him as a Christmas gift, which is not something you get to take from someone else, you vile woman. Carla spiked her sister's drink with sleeping pills as the family was all going to bed. The second she was unconscious, they held a rag covered in halothane over her nose and mouth, took turns violating Tammy, and videotaped the entire incident. Tammy started to get physically sick, which freaked the couple out. Carla held her sister down to stop her from convulsing, which caused her to stop breathing. Immediately, they disposed of the evidence, dressed Tammy, and placed her in bed before they called 911. When responders arrived, they noticed a chemical burn on the lower half of Tammy's face, but the two covered it up by saying it was a rug burn from when they dragged her off the bed to perform CPR. Tammy was already gone when she arrived at the hospital. It was ruled as choking from alcohol poisoning. The family went on to believe that it was just a horrific, unfortunate accident, but at a funeral, Paul was seen stroking Tammy's hair and placing a photo of him and Carla inside her casket. Can I go so far as to say that these people are entirely demented? Would you support me in saying this? After this incident, Paul and Carla moved to Port Louise. On the outside, things looked fine, but underneath it was all chaos. Paul was horrible to Carla, and Carla encouraged and participated in Paul's weird fantasies. She couldn't leave without the possibility of being outed as a killer. On June 29, 1991, Paul and Carla pulled up to their over-the-top, extravagant wedding in a horse-drawn carriage. I know it's the early 90s, but this is not the royal wedding, and you are not Princess Diana, so take it down a couple notches, okay? That same day, two people discovered human body parts in cement blocks while canoeing on Lake Gibson. The remains belonged to 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, who disappeared on June 15th, only 2 weeks before Paul and Carla officially tied the knot. Turns out Leslie was abducted by Paul. He found her locked out of her house because she missed curfew and offered her a cigarette. Leslie said yes, but when she got to his car, he pulled a blade on her, blindfolded her, and took her to Port Louise to meet up with Carla. Once Paul brought Leslie to his home, Carla and Paul violated Leslie for multiple days and filmed their disgusting acts as they did them. But at one point, Leslie's blindfold slipped, which caused panic for them. Shortly after that, they took her life. They kept her body in the basement while Carla's family came over for a family dinner. After eating and the family left, they dismembered her body, encased the remains in cement, and threw those blocks into the lake. Sadly, this would not be the only life lost at the hands of Carla and Paul. The next was Kristen French, a 15-year-old girl they abducted from her Catholic school on April 16th, 1992. Multiple witnesses confirmed seeing Kristen with two adults the same day that she went missing. They performed the same disgusting acts on Kristen that they did on Leslie. They kept her for multiple days, hiding her body in the basement while the family ate upstairs again. Eventually, they shaved half of her head and dumped her body in a ditch in Burlington where Leslie Mahaffey was also buried. Now, with At this point, Paul was already on the investigators' radar for these brutal slangs. Once the sketch was released to the public, people who knew Paul started calling in. Now, as a result, he was brought in a month later to interview for Kristen French's case. It made it even more apparent to investigators when Paul admitted that he had already been interviewed on the Scarborough assault cases. Now, in December, there were some significant developments on the case. One night, Paul viciously attacked Carla with a flashlight, giving her 2 massive black eyes and a broken rib. While she tried to play it off as nothing, her coworkers were genuinely worried for her safety. Carla ended up in the hospital where she claimed she suffered from battered spouse syndrome. Shortly after that, Paul was arrested. But get a load of this, guys. At the same time of all of this was going down, the DNA samples that Paul gave the lab a few years back had finally been tested. And the results? It positively identified Paul Bernardo as the Scarborough criminal. It was shocking for a lot of people to believe. Paul seemed like the perfect guy. How could he be this monster? Initially, nobody suspected Carla to be working alongside Paul. She and her legal team used this to their advantage, playing up the helpless wife going along with the evil husband thing. In exchange for a lesser sentence, Carla agreed to testify against Paul in court. The lesser sentence was only 12 years in prison, which caused massive outrage. Rightfully so. But Carla stuck to her defense that she was forced into these acts by Paul. Carla cooperated with the police, even telling them where the videotapes were from all of Paul's assaults. But dumb Carla didn't realize that she was on video participating in each one of them. The entire time she played up this timid, I'm just a little girl, I don't know any better. And the world believed her. Meanwhile, at Paul's trial, they played the videotapes in court. Prosecutors were pissed because they were like, if we had known that this lady was on the tapes participating with this dude, she would not be walking free. Can you imagine you're called in for jury duty and this is the case that's assigned to you? They had to sit there and watch those tapes in court. It couldn't be me. No thank you. Paul Bernardo was found guilty on all charges against him and was sentenced to life in prison for ending the lives of multiple young women and girls. The scary part is there could very well be more victims that we don't know about or that someone else took the fall for. Carla said that she remembered Paul harming over 30 girls, but the confirmed amount is somewhere around 13. Regardless, this man deserves to be locked away for the rest of his life. Same with Miss Karla Homolka. Carla ended up remarrying, having some kids, and moving to the French Caribbean islands of Guadalupe. Good for her, I guess. The only thing that we can really do is hope that she doesn't hurt anybody else. But one day, she's going to have to tell her kids about what she did, or worse, they find out on their own. Now, as for Paul, he's never shown any remorse for his crimes or given even a sliver of an apology. So if you're one of those weird alpha male types who treat women like garbage, maybe go to therapy. Treat women like human beings. No guy is that hot that a woman will put up with abuse for that long. On the flip side, if you encourage your friends, family, or partners in their toxic, horrific behavior, you need to be checked too. That was the story of Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka, aka Ken and Barbie. What do you think of this one? Personally, I can't believe that Carla is walking free. Thanks for watching. I'm Mack, and we'll catch you guys next time on another episode of Killer Bites.